1200 AD, the fall of Jerusalem in 1187, as well as the fact that following the results of the Third Crusade it was never possible to return the Holy City to the rule of the Crusaders, haunted the papal throne. Wanting to regain control of Christian shrines, Pope Innocent III made every effort to organize a new crusade, but his efforts were in vain. The fact is that England and France waged war against each other, and on the territory of the Holy Roman Empire there was a struggle against papal power, so practically no one responded to the calls of Innocent III. Nevertheless, the Pope did not abandon his plans and, thanks to the sermons of Fulk of Neuilly, the process of organizing a new crusade got off the ground. At a knightly tournament that took place in Écrit-sur-Aisne, a new crusade was announced, the leader of which was elected Count Thibaut III of Champagne, who, however, died before the start of the campaign. The new leader of the Crusaders was the Margrave of Montferrat, Boniface I. Soon, Count Theobald IV of Champagne, the Burgundian Duke Odo III and the Count of Flanders Baldwin IX announced their participation in the new crusade. This time the Crusader army decided to use a radically different battle plan. Instead of gradually advancing through the territory of Palestine in small groups, the Crusaders planned to gather a large army and, having landed in Egypt, defeat the army of the Egyptian Sultan, and then, without encountering resistance, establish control over the Holy Land. Since it was planned to transport a large number of troops to Egypt, the Crusaders needed a huge fleet. Therefore, the leaders of the crusade in 1200 sent envoys to Venice, Genoa and other cities of the state to conclude contracts for transporting the army to Egypt. In 1201, a Venetian contract was concluded, according to which the Venetians promised to provide transportation to Egypt for a Crusader army of 33,500 soldiers. To implement this agreement, the Republic of Venice needed time to build new ships and train sailors. By May 1202, the Republic of Venice had prepared 50 war galleys and 450 transport ships, for the use of which it expected to receive 85,000 silver marks from the Crusader army, but as soon as the collection of the Crusaders was completed, problems immediately began. The fact is that under the banner of the new crusade they managed to gather 4,000 knights and 8,000 infantry, instead of the planned 33,000 soldiers. Due to the fact that only a third of the planned army had assembled, the Crusaders were able to pay the Venetians only 35,000 marks instead of the expected 85,000. The Venetian Doge Dandolo faced the threat of huge losses, the occurrence of which he naturally could not allow. Of course, trying to force the rest of the money out of 12,000 armed soldiers is not only stupid, but also not safe. Moreover, the Crusaders could have seized the ships prepared for them by force, but fortunately for the Doge of Venice, there were no sailors among the Crusaders who could control these ships. Both sides found themselves in an awkward situation and had to find a way out. The Venetians had been engaged in trade for many centuries and therefore easily found a profitable solution to the problem. They offered to forgive the Crusaders' debt in exchange for help in conquering the city of Zara, which was providing serious competition to Venice in trade on the Adriatic. Venice had long been fighting for control of this city with the Kingdom of Hungary, but the Venetians did not have enough of their own forces to take possession of the city. The problem was that the Hungarian King Imre was a Catholic, and the Pope was categorically against the Crusaders taking up arms against their fellow believers. Moreover, the Hungarian king managed to promise to join the crusade, but most of the Crusaders wanted to get to the Holy Land faster and therefore they agreed to the conditions of the Venetians. The Venetians joined the army of the Crusaders, after which the 20,000-strong army boarded ships and moved towards Zara. The fleet arrived in the vicinity of Zara by the morning of November 10th, and despite the fact that the city's harbor was blocked with chains, the Crusaders and Venetians managed to land close to the city walls. The siege of the city lasted until November 24th, when the Crusaders managed to overcome the fortifications and break into Zara. Having plundered the city, the Crusaders remained in it for the winter, planning to continue their journey in the spring. Having learned about what had happened, Pope Innocent III excommunicated all the participants in the crusade, but then deciding that what had been done could not be undone and that it was somehow necessary to liberate Jerusalem, he cancelled his decision, leaving only the Venetians, who were the initiators of the capture of Zara, excommunicated from the church. Having paid off its debt to the Venetians with help in capturing Zara, the Crusader army could go to Egypt to implement its plan to return control of Jerusalem to life, but it turned out differently. The fact is that in the Byzantine Empire at its very dawn there was an era of palace coups. As a result of the struggle for power in 1195, Alexius III Angel dethroned his brother Isaac II, after which he was blinded and imprisoned in Constantinople. Isaac II's son Alexei was in Constantinople as a prisoner with his father, but in May 1202 he managed to escape to his sister Irene, who was the wife of King Philip of Swabia of Germany. Once free, he began to seek help in returning the Byzantine throne to his father. Soon he managed to meet the leader of the crusade, Boniface of Montferrat, as well as the Doge of Venice. In exchange for help, he promised to pay the Crusaders 200,000 marks, as well as allocate a detachment of 10,000 soldiers to participate in the crusade. In addition, he promised to subordinate the Byzantine Church to the Holy See, which ensured the loyalty of Pope Innocent III. So, thanks to the promises of Alexei, the plans changed radically. The Crusader fleet after wintering went not to the shores of Egypt, but to the capital of the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. Soon, the Byzantine Emperor Alexius III received news that the Crusader fleet was moving towards Constantinople, after which he immediately began preparing the city for defense. Unfortunately for Alexei III, the Byzantine fleet of that time consisted of only 20 ships that were not ready for long voyages. The reason for this state of affairs was that in 1187 the Byzantine Empire entered into a military alliance with the Venetian Republic, according to which Venice undertook to provide its ships for the needs of the empire. After the conclusion of this alliance, the Byzantine Empire allocated a minimum of money for its own fleet. In addition, the commander of the Byzantine fleet, Michael Striphna, who was the emperor's son-in-law, simply stole most of the allocated money. Thus, the Byzantine Empire not only could not quickly transfer additional troops from the distant provinces of the empire, but also prevent the landing of the Crusader army in the vicinity of Constantinople. On June 24, an army of Crusaders and Venetians landed in the vicinity of the city of Chalcedon, which was located on the Asian shore of the Bosphorus opposite Constantinople. Quickly breaking the resistance of the small local garrison, the Crusaders occupied the city, and on June 25 they established control over the nearby city of Scutari. Not wanting to enter into confrontation with the united army of the Crusaders and Venetians, Emperor Alexius III sent Ambassador Niccolò Rossi, who was from Lombardy, to their camp, planning to negotiate. He promised to supply the Crusaders with supplies for their trip to the Holy Land, and also to pay them a large sum of silver, but the Crusaders refused and declared that they would not leave the shores of the Bosphorus while the usurper sat on the Byzantine throne. On July 5, the army of the Crusaders and Venetians began landing on the shore near Galata, whose small garrison did not interfere with the landing and took up defense under the cover of the city walls. In turn, the Crusaders, having landed on the shore, set up a camp near Galata and concentrated on preparing siege weapons. The garrison of Galata was well aware that the city would certainly fall to a numerically superior enemy as soon as the siege weapons were ready, so they were forced to act. At dawn on July 6, the Galata garrison left the city walls and attacked the enemy camp. Since the attack was unexpected, they managed to destroy part of the siege weapons, but the Crusaders managed to quickly form battle formations and oust the Byzantines from the camp. The Galata garrison began to retreat to the city, pursued by the enemy, but could not break away from him. The Crusaders entered the city following its garrison, most of whom died in battle on the streets of the city, but some still managed to retreat to Constantinople. After establishing control over Galata, the Crusaders lowered the chain closing the entrance to the bay, after which the Venetian fleet was able to destroy the few Byzantine ships. The assault on Constantinople was inevitable. A huge city with a population of 350,000 inhabitants was defended only by a small garrison consisting of 10,000 Byzantine soldiers and 5,000 Varangian guards. They were opposed by an army of Venetians and Crusaders numbering more than 20,000 soldiers. The Venetians proposed attacking the city from the Golden Horn Bay, since the city fortifications in this place were low. The Crusaders proposed attacking the city from land near the Palace of Blacherny, since the city's fortifications in this place were also weak. It was not possible to reach an agreement, so it was decided that the Venetians and Crusaders would attack where they saw fit. On July 10, the Crusader army left Galata and advanced towards Constantinople. Already on the morning of July 11, the Crusaders set up a camp between the monastery of Cosmas and Damian and the Palace of Blacherny, after which they began preparing stone throwers to use them to make a breach in the city fortifications. A few detachments of the Byzantine cavalry tried to attack the Crusaders' camp in order to allow them to complete preparations for the assault, but due to the fact that the emperor did not dare to attack the enemy camp with all his might, the army of the Crusaders was soon ready to storm the Byzantine capital. On July 17, 1203, the first assault on Constantinople began. At the same time, the Crusaders and Venetians planned to storm the walls of the Byzantine capital at the same time, realizing that the city's small garrison would not be able to recapture and provide reliable defense in two places. The army of the Crusaders launched an attack, which at the first stage turned out to be quite successful, as they managed to climb the city walls. But at that moment the Varangian guards entered the fray, threw the enemy off the city walls and captured two knights. Having suffered serious losses, the Crusaders were forced to retreat. Meanwhile, the Venetian army stormed the city from the sea, taking advantage of the fact that all available reinforcements were deployed to repel the attack of the Crusaders. The Venetians were able to overcome the city fortifications and penetrate the city neighborhoods. Fearing an enemy counterattack, the Venetians set fire to the houses around the bridgehead they occupied, but the Venetian army did not dare to go deeper into the city. Despite the fact that, having repelled the attack of the Crusaders, the emperor had the opportunity to use the Varangian guards and defeat the Venetians, for unknown reasons he decided to act differently. Having gathered almost all available forces, the emperor began to move towards the Crusader camp, planning to attack it. Having reached the enemy camp, the Byzantines discovered that the Crusaders had taken a position advantageous for defense, which is why the Byzantine emperor showed indecisiveness and, despite the entreaties of his son-in-law Theodore Lasker, who demanded to launch an attack, ordered his army to retreat to the city. The very next morning, the emperor, taking with him only his daughter Irina and 10 centenarii of gold, fled from Constantinople. Immediately after the escape of Alexei III, his brother Isaac II was released from prison and declared emperor. He entered into negotiations with the Crusaders and confirmed all the obligations that his son had given. Arriving in Constantinople on August 1, the emperor's son was proclaimed co-ruler of the Byzantine Empire under the name Alexius IV. Having become the new emperor, Alexei IV emptied the entire treasury, but was able to pay only 100,000 marks instead of the promised 200. The Venetians and Crusaders agreed to wait for the second part of the promised amount, remaining for the winter in Galata. Meanwhile, discontent was brewing in the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The local population demanded the continuation of the war against the Crusaders, and the Varangian Guard, which was the most combat-ready part of the Byzantine army, expected to be paid a salary that had long been delayed. Realizing that his power was hanging by a thread, Alexei IV planned to let the army of the Crusaders into the city, but unfortunately for himself, he informed Alexius Ducas about his plans, who took advantage of the situation. Promising to pay the Varangian guards all their salaries, he arrested Alexius IV and his father, who were later executed. On February 5, 1204, Alexius V Ducas was proclaimed the new emperor. Refusing to pay the Crusaders the second part of the promised amount, he invited them to voluntarily leave the vicinity of Constantinople. Realizing that the Venetians and Crusaders would not just leave, the new emperor began hastily restoring the fortifications of Constantinople, and also tried to burn the enemy fleet with the help of 7 ships filled with flammable substances. But the Venetians were on the alert. Having repelled the attack of the Byzantine ships, they began preparations for a new assault on Constantinople. The new emperor, acting decisively, could not only defend his capital, but also try to defeat the enemy army in battle, but he did not have the money to pay the Varangian guards. That is why the Varangian guards left Constantinople, thereby significantly weakening its defenses. Meanwhile, on April 9, 1204, the army of Crusaders and Venetians began an assault on Constantinople from the Golden Horn Bay. Thanks to their numerical advantage, the Crusaders managed to capture the first line of city fortifications as a result of a swift assault. Realizing that without the Varangian guards it would be impossible to repel the enemy's attack, Alexius Ducas fled from Constantinople on the night of April 13. Already in the morning, Constantine Lascaris was proclaimed the new emperor, who perfectly understood that the city could no longer be saved, so he hastily left Constantinople heading to Nicaea. Left unprotected, Constantinople fell into the hands of the Crusaders and was plundered. On May 9, 1204, the Crusaders proclaimed Baldwin of Flanders as the new emperor, and renamed the Empire Latin. However, the Crusaders failed to establish control over the entire territory of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantines were able to maintain control over a significant part of the territories, proclaiming the Trebizond and Nicaean empires, as well as the Kingdom of Epirus. Later, the rulers of the Nicene Empire managed to regain control of Constantinople and restore the Byzantine Empire, but it was only a shadow of its former greatness and could not regain its former power.